When I bought my first camera and went out into the street, I just fell in love with photography.
Every one of these photographs has James in the photograph. That's why it's funny or poignant or noir.
There's always something else going on. It's not just the subject.
That shot could be a Cartier-Bresson. The moment, the framing, friggin' blew my mind.
The best pictures, it's always some little thing that happens.
His portraits are so revealing. You would respond to this like somebody punched you in the chest, grab your heart, twist it, and take it back out.
James's work, it conjures up cinema to me. Essentially, he's living in a dark room. This is James Stewart in Rear Window. This is the guy.
I loved being part of the family, being part of something bigger. And this was The Voice, the whole building. I was the staff photographer, along with Sylvia Plocki.
Well, The Village Voice was the story of New York, told in real time. It was the map.
We covered stories that other newspapers didn't cover.
It's this merger of art and journalism.
For years, I'd worked in different papers. I was doing pictures for everything you could think of. A lot of news stories, features, criticism, a lot of portraits. B.B. King, Hitchcock, Patti Smith, Godard, and Kurosawa. This was for Vanity Fair, having lunch with Liberace.
Raise your hand if you had lunch with Liberace.
We were so lucky to work during the times that we did. We're going to get to the point where nobody tells these stories. They don't exist.
What I've done mostly is document my life in New York. It's like a diary, really.
He likes seeing life around him. He likes being on a story.
There we go. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Owen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm so glad this came together. It's been a few years. I think, and just humor me for a second, James, because DW, I'll refer to you as DW. Okay.
That's
for
right.
the sake of the podcast. But and Judith were on the podcast with their last collaboration, the Booksellers, and I think this was probably just days leading into the pandemic. It was kind of a dramatic time. Hopefully this is less so.
Yeah, if the bird flu hits tomorrow, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, so far so good. But a lot of people said The Booksellers was the last film they saw in theaters before everything shut down. So it does have that interesting fact about it.
Yeah. Well, at least they got to see it.
Yeah.
You lucky people.
I remember fond memories of that, even though we're all kind of like starting to distance already. Hopefully people are hugging at these screenings that you're having. The film we're going to talk about is Uncropped. It's about the photographer who's here with us today. Thank you, James Hamilton, or photojournalist. And Uncropped is currently, as we're talking tonight, in theaters. I have the list right here. I don't even have to guess. I think we should mention them because it's pretty, I say, impressive, considering it's kind of challenging to get a small film into theaters for anybody, but you guys did a really great job along with Greenwich Entertainment. It's at the IFC Center in New York City, the Laemmle Royal in LA. But it's playing in lots of other cities, even up here, not too far up in Albany. That's interesting.
Yeah. In Sag Harbor as well, the Sag Harbor Cinema.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's
good
great.
Good work. And then it will be, as of now, as people are watching, it is available streaming. So it's going to be on, I won't be looking at notes the entire time, don't worry. But it'll be on Apple and somewhere around here I saw Oh, right. Apple and where else? I guess I'm going
All
to
the
guess
usual,
Amazon Prime,
yeah, the usual VOD options.
the usual suspects. Okay, fantastic. DW, tell me, and Judith too. You're going to tell me too. Well, why this subject, and tell me a little bit about the origin story, and then I'll talk to James sooner than later. I'm so glad to meet you. What?
Judith's the real catalyst of the film,
Oh.
so maybe she should start.
Okay, I'll start.
Judith is the producer of the film.
I'm the producer. James and I actually worked together at the New York Observer a long time ago. I was only there briefly. I was a photo editor at the New York Observer.
Oh.
Yeah. And I worked with James, and I obviously knew that he was this like phenomenal photographer, but at the time I actually didn't know that much about his life before the Observer.
Mm-hmm.
And I left eventually, and many years passed. And then during COVID, this is after the Booksellers, James and I were friends on Facebook, and I started seeing him posting all this stuff. And it turns out that he was at home like everyone during COVID, and he used that time to get organized about his like archive. I mean, you can elaborate on this, James, but he was kind of looking back on some of his work, and he started posting it. And at some point I was like, I was just like, this would be really interesting.
Your synapses started to.
Yeah. Not just, he's an amazing photographer, but he also had this very interesting history because he worked at 5 different New York publications as a staff photographer. So that's pretty unusual. He also had this interesting, working with filmmakers like Wes Anderson and George Romero and Noah Baumbach. So because there was so much more than just the fact that he was this great photographer, there was going to be an interesting look at New York journalism and a little film history. It seemed like it could be a great film. And then I talked to DW about it, and I guess you can take it from there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was going to say, but just to insert, a photographer in New York City from like the 60s through the, let's say, well into the 90s and beyond. I'm like, unfortunately, kind of a dark, quiet period in New York City, not much going on. Oh,
real boring.
Yeah, it's just complete snooze. Anyway, go ahead, DW.
Well, no, Judith, I mean, I remember James being the photographer at the Observer, but when she started showing me how much photography there was before that, how broad in scope, how amazingly like versatile it was, and just how much I was taken with the photography, that was unquestionable. Like the photography is just amazing work, and I think and also like, why isn't this work much more well known than it is right now, was another first initial question of mine. And of course that seemed like a very reasonable question for a documentary to be investigating. And then I think, the thing was, for me, was just like, as ever with You're Making Film, it's like the subject matter isn't enough. It could be great, like someone could be a great artist, or this, or it could be a great idea for a film in theory, but like, does it really offer all the things that make a film? Is that the best place to tell, to engage that, whatever you're trying to engage? So
like have an arc,
but an arc, or it's just a combination of elements, but I think often a lot of documentaries almost like would be better off being books sometimes, but that was the thing that then, as we talked to James a little, and it was really speaking to him and hearing more stories, hearing more details about the work, how he worked, whom he worked with, how he was able to do so many different things, that was really exciting. And then of course James himself was really immediately someone, like, it seemed like a great prospect to make a film with and about.
And I'll just add that he has, when you talk to James, he has just so many stories that you can't even, it's like, they're just so fun and they're so amazing. And, we couldn't even include, half of them in the film. It would have to be an epic film, but right. He just is great to talk to. He's a great storyteller. So.
Are you saying it's not an epic film?
James, give me some stories. Go.
So, stories. No, you mean off the top of my head? Good Lord.
Well, we can do that. We can have a separate podcast for that. I'm definitely interested. I can tell you that much. But what was your feelings about when you were approached about being the subject of a documentary?
A little queasy because
Hmm.
I'd never been on camera. Actually, a film was made around the same time, or a little later, about a woman I went out with named Cher Height, and I they kept coming at me to be on film because we had this 4-year relationship, and I really didn't want to be on film there. And I finally consented to an audio interview, but the idea of my presence on film was not the most comfortable thing to me, but I love these two so much that I really do still, you guys.
Oh,
And
Feelings mutual.
I completely went along with it after I met them. Well, Judith I already knew, of course, but when David and I were talking, I just knew that we were simpatico and we could do some good work together.
Well, I would, being queasy to me is a good sign. You know? Like, should be queasy if someone's being, you know what I mean? Like, I'd sure be queasy.
I didn't mind the pictures being on film. I
Okay,
minded,
of course.
I was anxious about myself being on film.
Well, I see. I mean, I will correct you and James by just reminding you that there is a photograph of at least one photograph of you out there with Godard.
There
So
certainly is.
you are have been on camera, but
There, as a matter of fact, there are only two pictures of me with somebody I photographed in existence, as far as I know. David may know more about it
We
than I.
debate Jody Mitchell and Jim Brody were kind of.
Oh, that's right, Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell.
Salvador Dali.
Joni Mitchell. I'm sorry.
Salvador Dali.
Salvador Dali and Jean-Luc Godard. So, and that was the reason I posed with Godard is because I was photographing on a balcony overlooking the city, and he was very anxious about heights, apparently.
Yeah.
And so I sort of went over to kind of stand with him and console him, comfort him.
You offered yourself as a stabilizing
I
factor.
tried to.
You did a good.
I definitely tried to, and he actually was smiling, so it was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I think of like another person who's been on this, like Dick Cavett, who just happened to be there in this time period, like, you know, from the 70s, whatever, 60s, 70s, 80s, where you still had all of these amazing icons from generations past still alive, and in many cases alive and well. And then also, you know, the young kind of rock generation, you know, it was that period
Did a
where it
famous
just
interview with Janis Joplin, actually.
that's right. Right. And I think she was on the same dais as maybe like Betty Davis or somebody like that, you know, representing what I'm saying. And in a way, your photos, your subjects kind of also encompass so many different generations as well as different, you know, disciplines and wherever the work took you, I guess, right?
It was always the ones that got away, though. You know,
Sure.
there were the ones that got away. I love film people so much. I wish I'd spent more time in Hollywood when I could have gotten a lot of people out there. I did become a collector of images of artists of all kinds. It's turned out that way anyway. And so because I had the entree of all these publications, I could really reach out and photograph almost anybody I wanted. As a matter of fact, at the New York Observer, first of all, I could do 2 pictures a week there of anything I wanted, and a lot of them were portraits, but all kinds of things really. And then eventually they whittled it down to 1 picture because they did a redesign of the paper. So, and that had to be somebody who's in town doing something or about to do something, a film coming out or somebody on Broadway or something like that, or a novelist, something coming out. so I would set up those kind of portraits. But I've spent a lot of time in hotel rooms, setting up pictures and all that, turning them into my studios.
Right.
Sort of
That could be. I can imagine. I imagine that could be tricky though, because lighting, right?
Well, I had a Jeep with press plates, so I loaded up my Jeep with a lighting kit, pretty elaborate in a way, because I had my two different backgrounds that I used, a black and a white one, and the lighting I wanted to have enough lighting so that I could do whatever I wanted wherever I thought the subject, however I thought the subject should be lit. So what I'd have to do is set up my little studio in a hotel room and wait for them to come in, and then they'd go on to another photographer. They would rent rooms.
Oh, like a junket.
A junket.
Yeah.
And they would rent rooms in one whole floor of the hotel and move the people from room to room. Now, the challenge became, given 10 or 15 minutes, coming up with a good image. And so I had to engage quickly, and I shot very, very little film, considering mostly it was about talking to the person.
Did you find that you had to kind of make a connection though with them? I don't know how many.
That's what I mean.
You didn't have a lot of time, right?
I didn't have a lot of time. That's why I had to engage quickly, really.
Right. I know the feeling. Yeah.
But these are people I admired, and I really, I love artists of all kinds. So it was not all that hard, believe it or not. And they say that, well, film people, or actors are used to being in front of the camera, but not looking in the camera. So it's a whole different thing. And they were almost always looking in the camera. So so it's they weren't all that eager to do that themselves, and I had to work with them.
James is a great cinephile, I'll just add, which you can see from the film. But I think when like-minded people meet James, and it certainly happened with us, like if you love movies, and James knows everything there is to know. And so I think you can tell, like, when you're like simpatico. And so probably James just had a way of, like, I don't know, just connecting with people. And so you can see it in the photographs, because he has pictures of people smiling that pretty much are famous for never smiling.
Alfred Hitchcock, for instance.
Yeah.
Jean-Luc Godard.
Jean-Luc Godard. Right.
William Burroughs.
What?
William Burroughs.
Oh, William Burroughs. Holy cow.
And others.
Pretty amazing. The name of the film, again, is called Uncropped, and I'm talking with the director, D.W. Young, and producer, Judith Mizrachy, and the subject of the documentary, James Hamilton. And I got to say, I just was starting to get over missing the voice. It took me a while. And then this film just threw me right back in there. And now I really I miss getting that copy of The Voice every Wednesday, going over to Astor Square, wherever I go, and picking up that new copy. It was like all in there,
I've never heard Astor Square talked about so much, because everyone says that they ran over to Astor Square to get the first issue.
Yeah, sure,
they really do.
Yeah, well, and I lived nearby.
Where did you live?
Oh, well, at least for a certain period, I lived on 15th and 3rd. Right by the Con Ed building.
We were kind of neighbors, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I passed you in the street and just,
I'm here on 11th, and between 10th and 11th on University.
Got it. DW, how did you go about? Well, maybe this is to both you and Judith, but were you concerned about? Well, of course you were concerned. I don't even need you guys. I can answer my own question. But were you concerned about how to tell a story like this? Which, where do you begin and how do you organize the film? I mean, it's obviously chronologically is one way, but you also have to have drama and tension and all those other things.
I don't know that we have that much. I don't necessarily think you have to have that much drama and tension in a documentary. It depends what else you're offering, kind of. But
okay.
I think I say that only because I feel like the ever increasing push for ever more dramatic documentaries is kind of like a problem at times. But I think I sort of had this initial, and Judith and I talked about it too, but this initial instinct about what I thought might work after talking to James and you know, kind of doing the first interview, and that was sort of a semi-chronological structure, which was sort of would be chronological in terms of his career and
Yes.
the 5 publications he was at, you know, as a staff photographer. But in between those portions, it would not necessarily be chronological and would have a freedom to bounce around and be looser and kind of get at elements of his work and life and other and considerations, you know, in perhaps a, you know, more hopefully a more interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we ended up doing. In the end, we stuck to that.
And of course, there are lots of people that have known James through periods or over periods of his career and his life, and was access to James. You must have obviously helped smooth that over, make it quite easy to get a lot of those folks. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Sylvia.
I wish there had been more in a way, because there were so there, but most of them, most of the people, or the most important people in my past, are gone, which is really a crime, because the art directors and the editors that I worked with that really were enormous help to me. The photographer I worked for.
Who gave you your first kind of who you left Pratt to work for?
Correct. A passion photographer named Alberto Rizzo. Just wonderful people that were hugely influential,
right,
in terms of basically giving me what I wanted in a lot of ways, but and helping me by allowing so much freedom, which is the main thing.
But
I think also,
go ahead.
Yeah, and everyone in the film, I just think, has great respect for James's work, and
sure,
and beyond even the more closer personal relationships, which I think, you know, people want to. That was a big part of being able to make the film, was just, you know, we didn't want to talk to 1,000 people, but the people we did want to talk to were really pretty, you know, a lot of really formidable people in various, you know, arenas. And so, but I think it being James was really a key thing, the key thing.
Did you go look for help or some advice anywhere for how to go about shooting stills? Because that's, like, you know, so central to this film is showing his work. And I don't know if you kind of just had a knack for that, because they really do come to life. In fact, I was reading this New York Times review of the film, coincidentally, and the reviewer, I'll give her credit, because I thought she wrote a really great review, Alyssa Wilkinson, and she wrote, Judith, you can jump in here, because this is not great video, me scrolling through a review, but there was that comment about how you'd basically want to stop the film if you could, just so you could have a look at the shots, right? It's like, wasn't there something to that effect?
Yes, I think that was actually the headline. You want to stop the film.
Well, that should have been easier. You're right, exactly. All right, listen, don't make me sound dumber.
Go to the top.
That's true. A documentary celebrates well, yeah, images that make you want to pause the movie. It's a great way to put it.
And DW can speak about this more, obviously, because he was the editor, but, you know, I think there's a challenge, you know, deciding you want an energetic kind of pace to the film, and you want to be able to include a lot of the work, because there's so much incredible work. I mean, we couldn't even come close to including everything we wanted to. At the same time, you do want to kind of slow it down for people to really get to look at some of the pictures. And one of the things about James's work is often there is like an extra thing that makes the picture funny,
right,
or interesting, you know, so you sometimes need some time to dwell on a picture. So I think DW did a great job of kind of making that work and like balancing that.
Yeah.
No, I think that was the challenge. I mean, James, it's like how to, because you know, in a film I think can be a great way in some ways to see photography, and certainly in a theater, and certain kinds of photography may, you know, play better that way than others. I don't know, but also it's not the best. At other times, it's maybe not the best way to look at photos.
But in
So
this
the
case,
question
it is the best way.
Yes.
well, some photos more. I think some photos work better than others, and so it's a set of considerations. And since James's work really works on many levels and in many different, you know, he can from close-up portraits to very dense, complexly framed and or sort of composed and detailed street work, and other everything in between. You know, how does one convey that,
Mhm.
right? And convey how much of it, how sort of how nuanced and how different so much of the work is, like, without, so you have to show a lot, like Judith said, but obviously you just to appreciate some of it, you need to spend some time with it. So, you know, it's like it's like all films, it's a set of compromises about what's the best combination of compromises that gets the most, you know, effective version of what you're trying to do. And so, you know, we did what we could to see a lot, really come out of it, hopefully, like with a real deep appreciation of what his work consists of. But obviously there's portions of his work that we didn't, you know, maybe highlight as much as others, just because it's better appreciated in a book or, you know, seen on a wall where you could really sit with it. And so we did that more selectively, where, you know, the denser photos, as opposed to a lot of details, you know, where people would talk about them, or, you know, there'd be a little longer to look at them. But so you know, I think you could never feel like it's perfect that way in some way, but just trying
And
to.
I did appreciate what the New York Times reviewer said. It's of course about the photography, but it's also, the film is really a lot about the conversations as well, which is why you know, it's not just a book or an article, because you know, a lot of the film is James in conversation with his colleagues and people he's collaborated with in the past, and that also kind of gives us a picture of the time that he was working as a staff photographer. And then also because of that, I think DW chose to include some of the photos like in the context of an article, like on the front page of the Village Voice. Like, why was that important? Why was this cover really important in the, you know, the history of journalism or the history of the voice?
Yeah, and I think,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and James
Please.
and I, you know, we talked about, like, you know, I ran the photos by him, and we talked, you know, it talked about what if he didn't like us, if he preferred a different photo, or there was a different version, or, you know, like, you know, in terms of showing his work, that was something that was, I think, a fairly collaborative, hopefully, process.
Oh yeah, completely. And also deciding which pictures to actually show in newsprint and
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Newsprint was always difficult to deal with because the printing was not great. So I had to overcome that somehow by shooting in different ways that were more just it worked for me anyway, because I was always shooting in a very graphic, bold way, I think, printing that way, shooting that way. And so the idea was for the pictures to jump off the page as best as possible. So so that was the challenge of newsprint for me. But I think I met it pretty well, but it did condition the way I photographed.
James, were you ever tempted to make your own film? I imagine you must have been.
I'll tell you why not. Because I worked on movie sets and I saw what it was like. I mean, if I was, I knew I knew when I picked up a camera that this was the right thing for me to do, because I like working alone mostly. But it was always tempting, and because of my love of film, one would have thought I would have gone to NYU, you know, after Pratt would have gone to NYU Film School, as a very dear friend of mine did, from Pratt. He was an art student, and he wound up being a terrific editor and filmmaker, mostly of documentaries.
Do we know the name? Or?
I don't think you would. His name is Arnold Glassman. You might know the films. He did a film called Visions of Light, which is a fantastic film about cinematographers and cinematography. He did a film called Dial M for Hitchcock, which is probably the best documentary about Hitchcock that I've seen. Very comprehensive, and he would have gone on, but he died young. But and he worked with Elliot Erwitt. He was a terrific filmmaker, and everyone, including the Coens at NYU Film School, thought that he would be a terrific director, but he wound up preferring editing, actually, and so that's why he was able to do these documentaries so well. Speaking of editing documentaries, but so I'm too much of a lone wolf, and I saw the challenges, and I'm not a writer, and I was working with Wes Anderson, who writes and directs, so it's just too. It's not my.
It's an extraordinarily collaborative art. Yeah.
The best part about it is the collaboration. I thought. I mean, I loved working with the people with Wes and everything, but I just didn't have the talent for keeping the machine going.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It does.
I was going to say the logistics, which are half of.
Yeah, it's just and I'm not a businessman either, so. And it calls for some of that too. So
the documentary is called Uncropped. It's not just some fun play on words. It actually has significant meaning. Nobody crops your photographs, right? Nobody's allowed to. You do the whatever cropping. Is that true? Or at a certain point you just decided that was going to be the case?
Well, early on, yeah, because I came from art and painting and drawing, and composition was extremely important to me.
Right.
So and filling the frame in exactly the way I wanted to fill the frame, even very spontaneously in the street. I was good at it, I think, and so I didn't want it messed with, and and it was like Hitchcock, when he was working with David Selznick, would not shoot a lot of footage, so that nobody, Selznick, who was famous with messing with the footage, didn't have any choices. So that's kind of the way I worked. And as a matter of fact, people respected that, understood that, and let me have my way. So I only presented a picture or two to anybody, freelance or otherwise. So they didn't have a lot of choice. It was mostly, I had real control over my work, which was very important to me. And I'm probably a little over fastidious when I shoot and everything. So,
Precious.
The other thing is that it became a game for me, not cropping the picture, getting everything in one image.
Interesting. Yeah. And you also always owned your negatives, right?
I processed everything I ever shot.
Right.
Here in my darkroom back there, kitchen, darkroom, without benefit of water. The water's in the bathroom. I don't have water
in the film. Yeah.
I processed all the film, made all the prints, kept everything close. Had everything in my apartment for years. Then I moved it to a locker because it's too much. But I kept everything here. So that nobody had a chance to own it or keep it or anything except me. And I never had contracts. I had 5 staff jobs, and I never had to sign a contract with anybody about ownership or anything. So maybe it was partly the time I was working. Maybe it was the amount of money they were paying me, but nobody was asking me or making demands like that for the rights of the film or or prints or anything. So the Village Voice was a half a block away. I would do the job, come back here, usually work very late at night, develop the film, make the prints, take them over there in the morning, across the street virtually, and that would be the job.
And now the sequel to Uncropped is spend the rest of your life organizing and I mean, now
Exactly.
you have exactly one book out of all these probably
I know.
hundreds of thousands of photographs.
Well, Wes Anderson had always talked about, and I had always talked about doing a book about filmmakers the same way Thurston Moore and I did a book about musicians. But then he said, no, we have to do the big book. And I don't know if the big book will ever get done, but it during as we said before, I didn't really post anything on Facebook or send pictures to anybody or anything like that until pandemic hit. And then I had a lot of downtime, and I was living out in East Hampton most all that time. So the beginning year of pandemic. So I had a chance to look back, digitize work, edit work, and discover pictures that I long forgotten, or a lot of them I don't even remember making. So I gave myself the job of fixing up these pictures and then posting them on Facebook, which is the first time I'd ever done that, even engaged with Facebook. So I was doing that, yeah. And then I've been sending Wes a picture a day since then, since the pandemic started.
We should have, Judith, next time you should have invited him on.
It would have been great. He's filming in Europe, so he's missed a bunch of this process of our release, but hopefully when he's done, he'll join us for something. And I will add, one thing about what Jim just said, he is also continuing to find photographs, including after we locked the cut. And he continues, by the way, also to tell us amazing stories after we locked the cut. So that's I guess a good problem to have. But every now and then we're like, oh, it's so good. How did we not know about it?
But these things are inevitable when you make documentaries, right?
That's right.
But I was only gonna say,
documentary ends when you stop shooting.
I'm confident that there will be more books to come.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yes. There has been a lot of demand ever since this film has come out. Everyone keeps asking that. So there will be.
I bet. Well, thank you all. I don't want to keep you any longer. It's getting late, and I really appreciate everybody making time and pulling this together as quickly and as everybody did. So thank you. And it was a delight to meet you, James.
And you too.
And to see the film. Thank you. And to see the documentary. It's called Uncropped. It is currently available on streaming platforms. So stream, and we'll do this again. What's that?
And pause.
That's right. Pause at the photos. Exactly. You can even
want to. If you want to. David will kill me if I said that. But
the second time you watch it, pause. How's that?
Second time you watch it, yeah.
Right.
But
good point.
Observe his splendid editing, which is really unbelievable. I
really
don't know how he did it, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Adam, because it's a masterpiece of editing, I thought.
It is a highly entertaining film, and it is really well edited, and I'm so glad I got to see it, and then to bring everybody on. It's like, what a gift. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.